Welcome back, Primas y Primos, to the Primas podcast. I am Cindy. Hey, how's it going? And this is my prima Jess.
Hey everybody, welcome back to our channel. Thank you for tuning in again. We really appreciate it. How are you, Prima?
Really appreciate it.
Happy Friday.
I'm good. Happy Friday. I actually I didn't have a chaotic Friday. Last Friday was super chaotic for me. So I totally understand that this time it was your turn. It's like we alternate.
I know.
Who's gonna get it next week?
It's up in the air.
No, but it's all good. Yeah, we don't know yet. We'll talk about it when we record. Just kidding. Yeah, so today's topic, I'm very excited because as most of you know, since we're so annoying and we like say it in every episode, we're psychology majors and we got our bachelor's degree in psychology, me and Jess, and we're pretty nerdy about the topic. And it's cool. Well, first, what is psychology for someone who's probably like, I've heard about it. Is it like brain surgery? Because let me tell you, my grandparents, when I got my bachelor's degree in psychology, they started to tell the neighbors that I was a doctor. And I was like, I'm not, but I'll go with it. Like, I'll roll with that. Because I was the first person in my family to go to college. So they were like, she's a doctor. And I'm like, I like that. That's how it should be.
It has a nice ring to it.
Cindy, so psychology. Doctora Cindy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You just started walking around with like what is the thing they check your heartbeat with? That you were just starting to walk around with that in a white coat for like no reason?
Something scope.
You're like, actually, grandpa, I'm gonna go to work.
Yeah.
Put on your like
coat. Like in the lab coat. Yeah, and I got a suitcase. I was like, gotta go do doctor stuff. And they're like, see. Like family, the family guy maid, she's Mexican, of course. Gotta check out Family Guy. Very racist. No, but yeah, she's Mexican and she's her name is Consuelo. I love Family Guy. Okay, psychology is the study of human behavior. Jess, that's not funny. Did you laugh late, or are you laughing at what psychology is?
I'm laughing late. There must, yes, it's your internet as usual. Sorry, guys. Cindy still uses dial-up. I don't know why. But
I'm not gonna let Big Brother get me, man. Just kidding. No, yeah. Now I literally haven't had time to get internet. Now I'm like, it has to happen soon. Okay. Anyways, stop complaining about my internet, Jessica. That's like so first season. My lighting is better. I fixed my lighting. I'm not in the dark. I feel like our last episode, you said I looked fine, but once I saw myself, I was like, that looks dark, you know, like in the recording.
Was it?
Okay. So yeah. And here I am thinking there's so much light. There's a lot to learn. Those people that put themselves on YouTube or who record their faces, not easy, you guys. We're just like regular ass females and
basic bitches.
We're a year in and we're still like, is that what they use that for? Okay, that makes sense. And so, yeah. Anyways, psychology is the study of human behavior. Jessica, did you want to add to that? Any other type of explanations? There's like a bunch of different maybe ways to say that.
Yeah, definitely. In a nutshell, I think you got it. That's the way I always tell people. And I mean, there's so many branches of psychology under the big like umbrella, but yeah, to sum it up, it's just the study of human behavior. And it's not even like considered a real science because I'd always question that, like, how come it's not bachelor's of science? And it's always like bachelor's of arts, like for psychology, for psychology degree. And I'm just like, I'm a scientist. Like I need that S instead of an A.
And then doctor, so yeah.
Yeah. And then they explained it to me. They're like, well, really? And I'm like, I get it. There's aspects of it that they don't fall in the realm of like an actual science, right? Because there's like 3 checks and psychology only usually typically marks 2.
I don't know. I got into psychology when I was in high school. So I was just so amazed. I just was so drawn and called to understanding why we behave the way that we do when we're happy, sad, mad, tired, depressed, anxious, unhappy. I mean, all of our moods, right? Psychology helps explain, I would say scientifically, even though I don't know if that's the right terminology because it's Bachelor of Arts, but it helps to explain through extensive research, through hypothesis testing, through a lot of just, I mean, for me, that's scientific, but I don't know. I'm not going to get caught up in the terminology. The point is, I just was like, this is amazing. What an amazing subject. And I just took Psych 101 or something like in high school. They offered that in the high school that I happened to go to. And I was like, what? This is a thing? Like, I want to do this. I didn't know how to get into it, but that's what struck me.
And you inspired me, remember? Because in college, I was just like, Prima, like, what are you studying? And I was like in 9th grade or 10th grade. And I'm like, what the hell do I know? And you're like, I'm studying this. And I said, well, can you elaborate a little bit? And you did. And I was so intrigued by what you were learning. I decided to major in it when I went to community college right here in Pasadena. And my first Psych 101, I was like mind blown too. I was like, no freaking way. Like, I'll never forget that class. And studying about like the obedience test or the Stanford experience. Stanford experience. Experiment, my bad. Well, it was an experience, wasn't it, for them? But it's an experiment.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool in your bachelor's degree of psychology. It's just like an undergraduate degree, so that's where we're at. But we go through a lot of experiments that have been done in the past, human experiments, because now, you know, there's more ethics involved. So people are more ethical about experimenting on humans. That's a good thing. But it's also cool that we have those experiments or like research studies or whatever, because like you said, we learned about obedience. We learned about a lot of stuff. Remember that one where I don't remember the correct terminology, but it's like somebody was getting murdered and everybody in the building heard, but no one did anything about it.
The social conformity one. Yeah. Where that girl was being raped and murdered, like in broad daylight in the Bronx. And that's when they started to do that study, the bystander effect. That's what it was called. That they would always assume, and they began to question like residents of the hotels or the apartments that could hear her screaming. And then they started doing studies on that, and they would ask people, and all the time people would always say, well, I assume someone else would already call the cops. And that was never the case, never make that assumption. And it's called a bystander effect.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of experiments that they did psychologically. I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm just saying it helps to put like a real face to some of these behaviors. When we act the ways that we do. And after I studied psychology, I was able to navigate the world better, not just with my environment, like my family, my partners, my friends. Not that I got it right, but I was just able to understand more when someone would act out of character, or if someone is stressed or depressed, or even with myself, I'm able to recognize it and trace it back to like, where is this behavior coming from, so that I can just be like, okay, this is a normal reaction. Because for me, psychology in a nutshell, or I guess in how it's helped me look at the world, it's almost like math, where you have 1 + 2 = 3. So for me, it's like you have this environment, and then this personality type is going to equal this. And we label it as a confident person, a sad person, a scared person, a psychopath, a narcissist. But really, psychology is helping to explain, well, if you have this environment and this personality type, these are the possibilities of human behavior when we're adults. So I think that's just cool, because it's therapeutic to know. In my healing, for example, like when my mom and me would get into it, it's like my mom's she's coming from a place of extreme trauma, child neglect, child abuse. And it just helps me be more empathetic to, okay, we need space, we need to relax, but I'm not going to react because I should know better. I can understand why this person is behaving this way. So
definitely. And it's that argument that we always go back and forth about, like nature versus nurture. Like in your equation that you were explaining, nature plus is your nurture plus your nature, which is like your DNA and your environment, equals a different equation for each of us. And I always trip out because like me and my sisters are so different, and a lot of our nature nurture are so similar, but our equation is, I mean, the solution is always, the outcome is always very different. And that's why we love psychology, right? Because it looks so different, but yet we always throw like this blanket across the board and say, well, actually this blanket covers like this many people, but like we're starting to see, I don't think that's the case.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. It's so nice. And that's very important to note that as humans, it's not as basic as a math equation because we're so very unique. We were meant to be so unique. And so you're never going to get a similar. You might be like, okay, I've known a few narcissists. I've known a few people that are confident. I've known a few, right? You get to know these people, but they're still very different from the next person that has a similar reaction type to stress. So the cool thing about psychology, after everything we mentioned, there's a lot of people that contributed to the world of psychology. A lot of people know, like, the biggest name in the world for psychology is Sigmund Freud. I think that's, everyone always would reference, or Pavlov because of classical conditioning. And that's pretty, I mean, there's a lot, like there's Abraham Maslow, there's a bunch, there's so many psychologists, but they're all dead. They're no longer here. And they provided their studies and their theories on psychology during that time in the world, like during their age in the 50s and the 40s, in England, in France, and in America. And so that's another thing to note. We only know psychology kind of from that perspective. We studied in the United States, so we have an American Eurocentric perspective of psychology. But still very philosophical, there's so many great things in it. And they're all dead. They're all no longer here. So they gave us, they contributed to psychology and they're no longer here. So that sucks, right? But I came across, thank God, for like technology advances, a bunch of professors, like not so much during COVID, a little bit before that, but it got really big during COVID, where everybody was uploading everything and anything. Professors, mechanics, roofers, nail technicians, everything, right? And because that's cool. That's the way we communicate, we learn, whatever. And so one person that I found is a psychology professor in the University of Toronto. So he's Canadian connection, because Jessica wants to
move to Canada, eh? That's reason 100
why Jessica I'm has a connection. Yeah, I don't know if you knew that, but so he's Canadian, but he's taught at Harvard. He's like big now. He's come out on the Joe Rogan podcast. Like he has some shit to say. That's really cool. So I just think it's super cool that we have someone in today's day and age that is able to contribute to the School of Psychology. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. And I like how you made that reference that, he's a living person who studies psychology. But I remember one of my professors had told us that, modern psychologists are standing on the shoulders of all the great like giants in this field, and he's just adding more to like the giant of psychology. And I always thought that was so cool. Like, you're changing the game a little bit and you're making your own footprints, but nonetheless, you're standing on the shoulders of all those giants that you mentioned who are no longer with us, that we love, and glad they got us thinking differently than any other person prior that we know of on record, right?
Well, I feel like in that part, you're absolutely right. We did absolutely anybody, right? Anybody who contributes, they're contributing to an idea. But like I mentioned earlier, we're taught, we learned psychology in a university in the United States. So there's a lot of Eurocentric background in that. So there even been some psychology professors that I've taken that'll say there's not a lot of male voice published because they weren't allowed to go to school. in the 40s, 50s. And if they weren't necessarily allowed to get doctorate degrees because they were women. And so I'm pretty sure there's so many contributors to psychology, but we're only getting access. Now it's different, right? Because we can do our own research and find other people that contribute to anything. But all of these big names in psychology that people will hear, I feel those are the ones that were selected to give a voice because they have some sort of privilege, some sort of connection, maybe money. You know what I mean? Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot more people than that are interested in human behavior, neuroscience, and psychology has a lot of branches too. So there's that part, it's so many branches. So I can talk about this forever just because I've been following Jordan Peterson for a really long time, not for a really long time, maybe for like 3 years. When did it start? I want to say when I was teaching my last year. So 4 years, I don't know, 3 years. But he has a lot of cool stuff online. He records his lectures, and there's old, there's new. And like I said, now that he's gotten so big, he has his own like podcast appearances and books. And so there's a lot of resources out there on him. But the 3 main things that I wanted to talk about that, like, I don't know, were like the most important things to me that I've learned from him was 1, raising strong children and preparing them for the world. So he's helped me a lot with like parenting. I've gotten a lot of mentorship from him as how to approach parenting in a way that's going to set your child up for success. And so there's just like a whole bunch of stuff on that. And then 2, it's not an easy world. Get over it and crush it. So he talks a lot about self-discipline, how to be like mentally strong, how to be your best person. So I listened to a lot of that stuff where he mentions you have to give in order to you have to give a sacrifice. He's a little dark sometimes, and in order to, like, what are you going to sacrifice for this that you want? So he's very realistic. He's like, there's going to be suffering. There's going to be pain in this world. So get yourself ready so that you can face it and keep going. So we'll get into these a little bit more. And I want to hear what, the things that you've gotten impacted. What were you saying, Prima?
Yeah, I was going to say, every time I hear sacrifice, I don't know why my mind always jumps to like a ceremony with candles at like midnight and like blood everywhere. I don't know why. Like, so when you said sacrifice, I'm like, what do you mean sacrifice what? Like who are we going to sacrifice today?
Mm-hmm. And he uses that type of language because I don't want to get to this yet because it's probably going to piss you off. Because I don't think you know everything about him, because if you did, you probably wouldn't like him. So I'll wait because I don't want to burst your bubble. But there's a reason why he uses that type of vocabulary. And then 3, my last one. So raising children, how to be a good parent. And 2, how to discipline myself to face the world. And then 3, religion, masculinity, and femininity. So Prima, what about you? What are some things that you've learned? I know I think I told you about I don't remember when. Somebody was telling you about him and you're like, oh, I think Cindy listens to him.
No, you showed me him last year when I went to Colorado for like 2 weeks, remember? And I was working from home there. And we started talking about him.
Oh, really?
Just since then.
I thought it was way before that.
No, it was just last August. And then we started talking about him, and then I started following him. And then I think you said there was a book that he wrote that you wanted to read, and we started talking about that and like going in depth and like listening to some of his short clips. And then I started following him on my social media, and ever so often he'll come up. And so that's all I really know about him, that he's a psychologist. But when you wanted to talk about him this time, I was just like, yeah, of course. Like, he's so interesting. And I love his voice. And to me, like, if you don't have a good voice, like, I'm going to tune out, like I have to be your voice has to be a certain like tone, if that makes sense. And I love his. Yes. I don't know, like, it's so soothing. Like, he should be on that app that's like calm, because there's people that read things, and I could probably fall asleep to like him reading Rock-a-My Baby or something. But The two things, or like the two videos I saw on him that really intrigued me, was one that says, tell the truth and don't lie. And it just sparked such an interest in me, because in our studies, we would talk about truth and like how people are not very honest in things they say. And to me, those are huge red flags. And for him to like give this whole little spiel about it was just intriguing to me. And then the second one was to teach people critical thinking. Because if it wasn't for our higher education and studying psychology and challenging ourselves and taking philosophy classes that were really, can't pay attention.
Sorry, my setup's coming apart. Go ahead.
So those are the two things that just recently, when we said we we're going to talk about him, I like dug into his files, and I usually find a lot of videos like where he's talking about like critical thinking and like how to provoke that in people. And it's so interesting to me because you want to question a lot of things, and I remember like one of my professors in one of our first introductory classes always said, like, when you go in this path of psychology, be prepared to question everything moving forward. We're never just going to take things as is. And I'm pretty proud of that like aspect about us, like even with you and I, like we're always questioning each other, like, well, what do you mean? And this and that. And it's just like, it's in our nature. And I think it's an amazing coincidence that we fell on this path, right? So we can learn more about it. But so that's where I'm at with Jordan Peterson.
George Clooney.
Jorge. I'm calling him
like,
Jorge
so
now.
George Clooney is like pretty cool. That's cool because I think another reason why I also wanted to do a podcast was to get other people interested in psychology, not so that they can become psychologists or study psychology necessarily, but so that they can understand their world better, because it's helped us understand the world better. So I'm like, when people get really upset at situations or whatever, I'm always like, I'm looking at it. I don't get involved, but I'm looking at it and like, this doesn't have to, we can be reasonable. We can practice being brave enough to say what we want, but then we're afraid, right? You always get deeper into like, well, why don't we stand up for ourselves? Or why are we afraid to speak up when something isn't, where we don't agree with something, right? We want to be so agreeable. And it's like, why? Because we're afraid. Well, why are you afraid? And then when you look into your fears, and he talks a lot about how to be confident, that the way that you're ever going to get anything that you want in life is that you have to be confident in yourself. But it's not that easy. You have to build the confidence. No one is going to build it for you. Even if you grew up in a very like awesome environment where most of your needs were met, there's still going to come a time in your life where you're going to have to face your fears. And they're so individual. As we were saying earlier, our behavior patterns are so individual that if someone reacts a certain way, psychology also made me understand judgment. Because when people act a certain way, most people will judge them negatively. Almost all the time. No one's ever like, oh, they must be going through some shit. Or if it's like a harsh reaction, then you got to think deeper. Oh, they must have gone through some stuff. If that's how they're going to react.
Correct.
In a place that might not get them to where they want to be, or in a place that might, put them in a worse position, they don't know any better. No one is going to, a lot of people judge people too, like, especially now that we're working with homelessness, right? There's a lot of judgment, like, oh, well, if they would just work, or if they would just stop doing drugs, or whatever we see. And it's just like, no, it's not that easy. There's more complexity to this person's life, and it's no one's responsibility necessarily, unless it's everybody's responsibility. Like if we're going to say you're responsible, then we're all responsible because we're a part of society. We're all human. No one's perfect. So I think that's another one, like it's harder for me to judge now. I'm not saying I'm perfect. When someone is coming at me or doing something crazy, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, there's many reasons why that's happening. We know that.
Yeah, you're understanding that person, you're reading their body language and like critically thinking about the situation, and like painting a bigger picture than this isolated thing that's happening in front of us that people are so quick to judge. And it's like, you don't even know what they're going through, or like, I don't understand how quick people are to make those assumptions and judgments. It's kind of sad to me, because I'm just like, you lack empathy and understanding for like your brother and sister, essentially. But
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, what would be the benefits to understanding?
the benefits would be, so you're not making a quick reaction or impulsive decision based off something that's not even actual, that's not even what it might appear to be, but you have no idea why this is happening. So for you to just quickly react to something, I think, yeah, isn't. So understanding and taking a step back and being like, you know what, maybe I could avoid this person, or there's no need for me to like have a confrontation with this person, or for things like that, or like maybe my opinion doesn't need to be said out loud right now. Maybe I could just like shrug and deuces, like I'm a step back and let you do you, whatever the situation may be.
Yeah. What I like a lot about Jordan Peterson is that he'll talk to that. He says a lot about put yourself in a position, in the different positions that you have to play on earth. Put yourself in positions where you're going to have success. And so if you're judging someone, if you're talking behind someone's back, if you're being critical, if you're being difficult, whatever it is, when you're lacking empathy, there's some people that just they didn't learn that, or they just, something happened again in their environment where they're just less empathetic. So there's other ways around that, right? Because in order for you to succeed in life, it's better that you have better relationships. It doesn't mean kiss ass and get along with people all the time. It means, what does judgment serve us? What does talking behind someone's back serve us? Whatever, situation where that's coming from a place of judgment, it doesn't serve you. So take out all of the other equations. It's doing you more harm, because now you're thinking negative thoughts, releasing negative chemicals, putting yourself in a stressful, right, like state of mind. And we don't look at it that deeply, right? We don't think, oh, that's what we're doing. And it's just like stress kills. So anytime you're thinking negatively about someone else, about yourself, about whatever, it's just not healthy for you. So it's not benefiting you in any way to be less understanding. So you'll get more out of life when the more you understand about people, the planet, the world around you, right? The more you understand, the more you're able to set yourself up for success, I guess, is what, in a nutshell.
I've heard him talk about that too, like setting yourself up for success. And I think he went on a tangent once about like how organized you are, or like how ready and prepared you are. And define, like when you observe someone who's like always ready or like organized and has their day planned, they're more likely to adapt to any sudden change than someone who's less organized or less prepared, studies have shown. And I thought that was interesting, because I would consider myself very organized. And yeah, when a monkey's thrown in like the wrench in like my blender, and I'm like, oh shit, like I just quickly adapt and rearrange some things to make it work, as opposed to now it's like, well, I have to do A, B, C, and D. And now this letter came in the mix, and I'm just like, it's too chaotic for me, But I thought that was an interesting, like, thing he said about setting yourself up for success. And that's, yeah, being ready and organized, prepared.
One thing that got me through one summer one time when my daughter was really young, so she was kind of like a baby, maybe like 1 or 2, and I had like 2 months off of work. That's when I was teaching, so like you have the summers off, and it was really hard on me because I didn't know what to do, and she was young, and she's always been very like active, and I didn't have a plan. And so one thing that he said was that when you start to get depressed it's because you don't have schedules for yourself. And so I was like, what? And I love schedules and I love doing that stuff, but I never thought about it to that. I didn't think it would lead to depression, but I was like so unhappy, grumpy. I just wasn't happy because I'm like, I would get frustrated and bored, like it was just a weird state of mind. But once he said create schedules, yeah, it was tedious, but it was just kind of like you have to be patient, create these schedules and push them hard for like a week or two, and then that's it. The problem is over. So when he talks about sacrifice, it's like meal prepping. A lot of people would be like, well, I'm not going to spend 4 hours of my Sunday meal prepping. And for me, it's like the benefits are in the long term. The benefits are you're going to be healthier, you're going to save money, and you have something ready. So during the week, you're not wasting time thinking about what am I going to eat, being hungry. So then going to get food outside, spending money. There's just a lot of ripple effects to when you're not prepared. So I have, and I think I taught that. I think after I learned that, I started to teach and I taught high school health, but I started to teach just very basic, like maybe not a whole day, like a high schooler isn't going to be able to organize their whole day, but what if they create morning and night routines? And that's just something that, again, I don't have my whole day organized. I should, and I need to get better at it. But we have very strict morning and night routines that have gotten me through a lot. But we can always get better because there's so much stuff that I'm still trying to build habits. That's one that I got down. That's why if you ever hear my family, they're like, why do you go to sleep so early? Why do you put your daughter to sleep so early? And it's just like, it's a ritual, man. Yeah. But no, it just helps. It's something that worked for us, and it works for my daughter. She knows it's coming. Her body starts to wind down and it's just nice, to have that. But it is hard sometimes because I have to stick to it. So that's the sacrifice. Like you have to be consistent in whatever it is that you're doing.
And I like planning and organizing because I hate wasting time. I hate just like not having anything ready or like to go or like, I like to have all that preset and be like, okay, this is what we're going to do and more or less. And I could be a little flexible, but nonetheless, in my mind, I have an idea of what my day is going to look like, and about like 90% of the time, that's what my day plans out to be. So you're right. I think that preparedness and being organized and being mindful of your time and, just other people around you. It's such a pet peeve of mine when like people are running late. When I was like, oh, what time is this? And they're like, yeah, 7:30. And it's like an hour later. And it's like, that's it. Check 1, 2 more, you're blocked.
Yes, me too. I have this tendency to be, I guess, respectful because I'm respectful to myself. So like, I'm always like on a time crunch when it comes to others. And I remember one time me and my mom getting into it over, she's like, well, I'm not going to do that because that person did this. And I don't work like that. If someone does enough shit to me that I don't like, I'm going to handle it. But it's not going to be in a, well, I'm going to get them back then. It's never that. That's just not my nature to get people back. When people do, I'm always like, I trip out, like just like what goes in their head, for them to have the ability to be like, oh, they fucked it. They hurt me. So I'm going to hurt them. And it's just like, no, that's not, why would you do, but I get it. But anyway, so yeah, with me, it's always been like to be on time or to be courteous to others, whether they do it back to me or not. I just, that's who I am. I just carry myself like, no, I'm not going to be disrespectful just because you disrespected me. I'm going to handle it. I'm going to stand up for myself, but there's no need for me to ever be disrespectful.
Yeah. And we come from such a solution-based Prima, like it's like that figure of speech when people used to saying, it would drive me a little crazy too, because it's applied in this aspect. When people would always say an eye for an eye. And I'm like, what does that even mean? So like you take my eye and now I have to take yours and I'm gonna be okay. And it's like, no, we don't fight fire with fire. And I think our perspective is like, we're going to fight fire with water. How about that, son? And like, I'm not going to like match your energy. I'm going to come like totally different because I don't get any pleasure or it doesn't make me feel any better if I'm going to come at you the same energy you're doing with me. I don't get it either. And you just made me think about that.
So Jordan Peterson talks about the difference between femininity traits, like female traits and male traits. And what we're saying that is more natural to us, I think he would call it a feminine trait. Like, oh, well, and that doesn't mean that other women don't have more like, different thoughts and aren't ready to go there. And hey, we respect everybody. But I think also other personality types, like maybe a male is more rough for us as females. Like they're able to make those like eye for an eye decisions without a lot of remorse. I think it's just in their nature. This is what Jordan Peterson explains. So I really love how he talks about female traits and male traits. And again, this guy's in his early 50s and late 50s. And he's a white male from Canada. So he's also speaking from that perspective. There's a lot of stuff that me and him don't agree on, but I still respect him as a psychology professor. I still respect his point of view, but he's Christian.
Is that the big secret you're holding?
Yeah.
That's it. You're canceled. You're off. I'm just kidding.
We're done. Yeah. He's super open-minded, but he does quote the Bible a lot. And what I like about it is that he explains it in a psychological way. He'll take stories from the Bible and he'll be like, this meant this. And then he explains kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to get too into it because I already see Jessica's like texting me like, bitch, if you don't stop talking about the Bible.
I already got distracted with something else. It's crazy how once I hear religion, it's like I zone out. It's like I conditioned my mind.
That's why I didn't want to say it. I waited like 30 minutes in, I feel.
Yeah.
But that's why he also uses vocabulary like sacrifice, like we're sacrificial beings. We have to. So I think that's from the Bible. And that's also like, he applied it to modern day human behavior. So he's also like, he's not anti-feminist, but he's not for like equal rights or equal pay or gendered vocabulary. Like, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff that he's more on the conservative end.
Well, Sigmund Freud was very controversial as well in his time.
Oh God, this guy used to be a hardcore drug addict, but it was fine during that day. No judgment there.
Yeah.
So he was like on coke.
Sigmund Freud?
Yes.
Well, you said he was from Europe. Do you remember which country he was in?
I'm not a big fan of Freud like that.
Yeah, it was at the.
But I just remember he did a lot of like weird experiments on himself. That's another thing. Like they're not going to publish that. They're only going to publish like the cool stuff. But like a lot of psychologists, once you tap in and that's all you're learning is brain, like behavior, you also learn how to manipulate someone negatively. And so, or under substances. So they would experiment a lot, but they're not going to teach us that in Psychology 201, abnormal psychology.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. So, okay. He also helped me look at males differently because I had kind of like a thing with males, like growing up in my family, my mom, our traditions were Mexican. So
I have
like
a question. When you mean hunters and gatherers, is it kind of like from year one where like women had certain traits and like men were gatherers? So they have like that impulse more because they have that like when we were in huts and had to survive.
So yeah, he talks a lot about evolution. And so the females were gatherers and the males were hunters. So yes, he talks a lot about how males
we evolved.
I don't want to speak too much about males.
Yeah,
because that's not my specialty.
But they've evolved like essentially to have that repulsive trait more so than women. That's why he references feminine and female. No, feminine and masculine traits. Sort of.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. He just says that guys, little boys, they're more willing to take risks where we don't understand that as women, right? But that doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means in our nature, we're supposed to nurture life and protect the home. I mean,
and our offspring.
And then males, and like to be mother, to nurture. And so males are more risk takers. Now we don't have to hunt, right? But like, let's say something like gambling. Those are huge risks. And guys, that's like a game to them. Like it's like adrenaline. Where women, it's like stressful to even think about, right? Because it's like, why would you do that? But both those things are very natural behaviors in our species. We're chemically wired that way. Testosterone, we have testosterone as women, but men have higher levels. And that's where the risk taking comes in. That's where the rough play comes in.
Yeah.
Where women,
that hormone is linked to those traits, and estrogen is linked to our certain traits. But yeah, you're right.
Right. They're meant to help us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're speaking very general, you know, we understand there's an entire spectrum in between that. That's a whole other topic another day.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is he does a good job. Like I really loved, I'm a female, I'm a woman. And what I'm really happy about is in season 3, we're going to bring on some guys that we've never worked with before, because we want to hear the topics that we're talking about from their perspective, from a male's perspective, because we understand in psychology that in order for us to have better success in life is to understand our environments. And as women, we need to understand men. And men, I'm not a man, but you know, hey, I have testosterone in me, so I can relate. To understand women. And in today's society, we do not understand each other. I can't say understand. I'm trying to. We're trying to bring in these voices. I love listening to him.
Even though you grew up with 4 brothers, you don't understand them?
No, because, okay, so what's really cool is that he talks about that. He talks about when boys grow up with women, or boys grow up with men and women, or just men. So there's different influences that happen in their behavior. So my brothers were raised by a woman. Like my dad passed away early on. And even before that, him and my mom separated. So, and even during that time, men weren't necessarily that nurturing. I think now we're starting to see more men become more nurturing, but you know, our dads, they didn't have that connection. Nobody showed it to them, right? Because men are supposed to be tough. And so, again, there's just so much, I can't even explain it, but it still helped me understand to be more empathetic towards men, you know, that have hurt me or that I've had issues with, that I'm like, okay, I can try to understand that they're just as lost as anybody, right? Like they're also, we talk a lot about toxic masculinity and the patriarchy, and we're going to continue to do so. And Jordan Peterson is totally against that. He's like, have you heard those women? And I'm like, yeah. But I love it when he says stuff like that. He sounds just like an older man, and he's just like, they're trying to like turn everything upside down. And I'm like, that's a good thing. But then here I am, a millennial, a female, right? Mexican. So I'm talking from my perspective. I always say, like, if I ever meet him, I want to ask him questions and be like, please don't hate me. Don't cut me off. I literally just want to have a conversation. I love you. But he's going to be like, you're one of those.
I know. I'm gonna be like in the back, like, get your security ready, because you're about to hear some crazy shit. Just get them ready, bro.
No, I just want to pick his brain. Like, what do you say to the rape culture? What do you say? You know, there's just so many things that when he's talking, I'm like, okay, but what about this? Or what about that? Or then people will want to debate him and they come in so angry, like feminists that are like hardcore, you know, just whatever they decided, like that's it. And if you're not with it, you're fucking dead.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, come on, look at who you're going up against. Like, that's not a good debate. That's not, you guys are getting mad at each other. So if I ever said, I want to talk to you about these things, I feel like he'd be like, fuck you, crazy woman. Billy would be a compliment. But I'd love to talk to him and just, for real, to get his perspective, not to agree or disagree, just to be like, you're a man. I want to hear what you got to say about this. So yeah. See, we can talk about this forever.
How do we provide solutions for this topic? I don't have any. Change your major to psychology.
Change your major to psychology.
That's one solution.
Yeah, well, you don't even have to, like, for psychology, the like bachelor's degree in psychology, you can attain all of that information now online. It's just a matter of like dedicating yourself to learning it, but it's fun. It's interesting. No, but okay. So I have some solutions. What I learned, and I'm going to pretty much say like some of the things that he's helped me with. So parenting is difficult, as you know. And a few things that I've taken away from Jordan Peter's teachings is to don't be overprotective. And what do we mean by that? Like a lot of millennials, right? We get that bad rep where we don't want a child to get a scratch. We don't want them to go through any downfalls. We're going to extreme right on the other side. So don't get dirty, don't all sorts of stuff. Don't say this, don't say that. Don't do, there's just so much shit, right? And because we're trying to protect them. So we're coming from a good place, but he's saying you're not setting your child up for success because that is not the real world. You cannot protect them for the rest of their lives. You cannot protect them when they go to school, when they're by themselves in the world. And so when I started to listen to that, I had to deal with my fears and really look into like, your child is not your property. Your child, your job is to nurture them and pass on all of the things that you know for them to survive, and then let them to be free, right? Again, I come back to that quote that I said last week, Maya Angelou, who says, love liberates, it does not bind. And so if I want to liberate my child, I want to be strong enough to pass on stuff so that she's strong enough to make it. And she has to have scratches. She has to, physically and metaphorically, right? Like she has to get a little beat up by life. We all do. When we're overprotective, what does that adult look like? They look like they handle stress very badly. Those are the people that just, you can see it, like, bro, don't go down like that, right? But if their parents always did everything for them, if their mom always did shit for them, their dad, they didn't learn to do it themselves.
Correct.
And no parent wants to set their kid up for fail. The parents didn't do it on purpose, but that's what we're producing, is oversensitive children. Once they get older, right? They're like, oh, it's too much oversensitivity, right? We talked about that in season 2, like cancel culture. Like take a fucking joke, or not, but don't erase someone and cancel them. Like that's too extreme. I get it, but that's just, I'm just saying that.
Nurturing your kid and giving them the right tools to set themselves up for success. And I'm completely on there. Like sometimes I know like you've challenged that a lot within me. And I'll always reference that time when you're like, just let her. And she like got yogurt all over her. And at first I was like, what are you talking about, Cindy? Like, why is the family right about you? Like, you are the crazy one. But then like I did it. I took a shower and you handled it. And then I came out and I was like, what's the big deal? She has yogurt in her hair and her face and all over her. And it's just like, she was so happy, you know, she was just experiencing that moment. So I feel like, yeah, we're making a very soft turf for them where, yeah, we don't want them to get hurt. It's like essentially they're walking on pillows everywhere. But yeah, I want my daughter to have some adversity. I want her to go through some shit where it's like, it's going to challenge her, and then think back at those times, you know, hopefully my parenting skills kicked in her, and like she could make the best choice. Like you were saying last week, you know, like how you want to implement those standards in peace, or those like ideas in her. So it is tough, but you're right.
We're all doing the best that we can. Yeah. Our parents were doing the best that they could, their parents, you know, so we talk a lot about trauma, but we also talk a lot about empathy in order for us to move on, to work on our baggage so that we're able to move on to better opportunities in life, better relationships, better career opportunities, better relationships with our kids, not just romantic relationships, all the relationships that we want to have, to know how to have them in a healthy way. The other thing I learned was to raise children to think for themselves. That kind of is like all the same thing. So for example, when I want to change my daughter, it's just easier for me to just pick out her outfit, go put this, whatever, it matches, whatever, right? But then if I step back and allow her to think for herself, she doesn't want to wear what I want her to wear. She wants to wear her own stuff. And she should have that ability to learn that she is an individual, right? And so if I start making all of these decisions for her that are more for me, they're like, no, because that doesn't match, or do your hair, what are people going to think? Or, you know what, it's going to take longer and you're going to make a mess if you wash your own dish, so I'll just wash it for you. There's so many different examples. We finish their sentences. And so we're creating the same thing. That creates depression. That's another thing that Jordan Peterson talks about, is that an overprotective parent is trying to do everything for their child and they're left with nothing to do. And we're here to do stuff. We're here on this planet and on this world to explore, to create. We have our own shit to give out to everybody. And an overprotective parent will hinder that. And they'll just make it to the point where it's like, you don't have an expression. You can't express yourself. And that creates depression or other stuff.
Yeah. Showing your kids how to think and not what to think. And I think a lot of us try to implement our ways of thinking and vice versa, but it's really important to acknowledge that they are these little tiny human beings, you know, they have their own personality, they have their own mind, they have their own ways of doing things. Even as young as ours children are, it's still interesting to like witness, you know, like I can see their personality, I can see their temperament, I can see their generosity and so forth. So for me to like impose my beliefs, like I'm going to give her what I can on the table, and it's for her to like pick and choose, you know, like for herself.
What works for her. The other thing that's kind of the similar to like male traits or masculine traits, and then like parenting. So like fatherhood, he has a lot of stuff about fatherhood, how to be a good man. And like, I don't know, I like listening to those things, even though I'm a woman, like it helps. And so he says it's important for the mom to be in a child's life, and this is their job towards the child. And then the dad's job is, it was called like wrestling, like guys that's in their nature. They're rough. They're a little bit more careless because they're more confident. Or just brave, you know, like it's in their nature to look away, where moms were always like just so super hyper alert when we have young children, and guys will turn their back a little bit. And that opportunity that opportunity sets the kid up to be more risky. And as moms, sometimes we don't have that ability to allow them, because we're like, no, oh my God, don't do that. Don't toss her like that. Don't do this. And that's important. That's also important, is so that they're able to stand their ground, that they're able to feel pain, that they're able to understand how to defend themselves. And all of those indirect things that a guy would do, a dad, is something that's just, I'm not going to wrestle. We play, but then I'm like, why did you know what I mean? Like I don't want to wrestle. And if I do, it gets personal, and it shouldn't get personal. And with guys, it's like, we're just wrestling. Rough and tumble play. That's what he called it. So the other thing is, I guess the last thing, be dangerous but disciplined. Yeah, that's more about mental discipline. And, you know, he talks a lot about building yourself up physically, mentally, spiritually. So yeah, I felt more confident after I started to gain muscle when I went to the gym, and more confident knowing that my core was stronger because I'm eating well and I'm moving around a lot. And there's just so much that goes into when you start working on yourself, like taking deep breaths, meditating, being in nature. All of those things are like my form of building myself up, so that whatever life throws at me, I'm more prepared. I'm not where I want to be. I'm obviously always going to try to reach more peace, more balance in life. But I do handle stress better than others because I am more prepared. And that prepared doesn't necessarily mean write down what you're going to do. It means sleeping well so that you wake up alert and energetic, eating well so that you're not lethargic, hydrating so that all my systems working properly. There's just so many things that go into preparing yourself, and then doing your bed every morning. That's who I learned that analogy from. Do you guys remember that?
Yes. I still haven't mastered it.
So Jordan Peterson. Okay, so last thought. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about, I think he was talking about millennials. He argues with them a lot. Like like he'll have like conferences and they're like, F you, you're anti this, he's just like, no, I'm not. Come debate me, bitch. Just kidding. He doesn't come off like that, but he kind of does. Like, okay, let's debate. Like, let's really. And he says, be confident enough to have a debate. If it gets weird, okay, fine, walk away, but be confident enough to not be afraid to share what you think. Not because it's right or wrong, just because that's a debate. Like, well, I think this, well, I think this, well, I think this, well, and what was I saying? So, okay, so he has an analogy. What analogy was I talking about? Did I say Titanic
The
or
bed.
something else?
No, the bed.
Oh, the bed.
ADHD.
Okay, there's another one about Titanic. Okay. So, in the episode about Trump, where he like the people like ran into the Capitol and Trump was like, yeah, or I don't know. But like that's basically overthrowing the government, right? The government is making decisions for whoever and they don't like the decision, so we're going to overthrow the government. And then he says, you want to overthrow the government, but that takes a lot of skill and discipline. So if you want to talk about it, be about it. Do you make your bed every morning? That's a task that you should give yourself. It's easy enough. And do that. Start to build discipline and start small. Because if you want to overthrow the government, it's just such a cool argument. And then so it really questions, like, anytime you have a complaint about something, anything, I'm like, Cindy, did you do your bed? And I do my bed. I've gotten better at doing my bed every morning, but you always got to keep adding, right? Like now it's this. Are you consistently eating healthy? Are you consistently building muscle? Are you consistently doing yoga every single day? No, right? Like there's some days that I don't. But it's a good one. It's kind of like to hold yourself accountable. Like you have all these big dreams and plans, but you're not even doing this consistently. And that's a basic human need of yours. Mm-hmm. So I feel like those are some solutions.
Those are good ones.
Yeah.
Great topic. I like, we could talk about psychology all day and different theorists, and he's one of them, these are all just theories. These are not facts. He's just giving his perspective and like giving examples and like research to back his argument, and I think it's so interesting, because everything could get disproved at any moment. When we were in school, there were 9 planets, now there's 6. Like everything could get disapproved.
And then they added another zodiac sign.
Yeah.
What? What's up with that? No, I'm playing. But I mean, I think they do though, right?
Like they did something, yeah. Eloy would know.
Eloy. Fact check. Yeah, so we hope you enjoyed this. It was just something that I think is super cool. That we still have a psychologist that's and by the way, he doesn't say his stuff is theories. He's like, this is factual. So that's yeah. No, but he like sometimes he says stuff where I'm like, okay, he's talking from a very older generation, like that's kind of how people talk back then. Like, no, this is the truth. And so yeah, he's really cool. I really like him. I like his contribution to psychology, even though again, we don't hit on all points. You guys should still check him out and tell us what you think. And remember, change your major to psychology.
Number 1. We'll check in with you guys soon about that. We're going to need transcripts sent to us.
Yeah. So if you want to follow us, you got to send us your transcripts. Just kidding. That's like so random. Okay, you guys, it always gets weird towards the end.
I know.
I want to finish on a high note and then I go like,
you haven't conditioned yourself to like know when to stop. It's like you just keep going and going and going.
I know. And I'm like, and then I had a really weird dream and you're like, stop, no one needs to hear that. You're gonna make us lose the 3 followers. No, okay, so thanks a lot, you guys. We really appreciate it. We have a lot of cool stuff coming in this season. I'm so excited because I keep booking speakers and we have some cool topics. We haven't touched on these yet. And so I'm excited to touch on them.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and we love you.
Bye guys.